make sure that it's SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. So make sure that you cover that with each person and shape their goals. You're going to discuss the therapeutic factors and how they contribute to group effectiveness. We'll also understand some research findings related to therapeutic relationships. We'll talk about guidelines for getting the most out of the group experience, issues that face co-leaders during the initial stage, and how to open and close sessions. All right, so by introduction, chapter 6 in the group therapy book describes the characteristics and elements of a group process that are most pertinent when a group begins. Things like orientation, exploration are the major processes that occur in the initial stage of group development. So orientation is getting people familiar with what's going to happen, whether it be group structure, group process, rules and responsibilities. These are all part of the orientation process. And exploration, trying to figure oneself out, figure out where one fits within the larger group, is also important. Now, keep an eye out for people who are reluctant to self-disclose. That's common. A reluctance to self-disclose or a resistance might come from a hidden agenda. Now, it's not always a hidden agenda, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, but self-disclosure is important for the openness and growth process. So in the beginning, without trust, people might not self-disclose. But we talked about resistance in an earlier lesson. And I said resistance was when people do things that go against what the goals or target of the group is, right? So you want to pay attention to resistance as well. And if there is a hidden agenda, what is a hidden agenda? This is something that a person may not openly acknowledge, and it may not be discussed by the group members, but they may carry that into the group and can use it to disrupt the group process. So there are people who join groups and they torpedo the group process due to whatever their hidden agenda is. And you can't know that until you start to see the behaviors manifesting. So it's imperative upon the leaders to shape productive norms, encourage members to focus on themselves rather than others, reinforce the here and now focus, model the behaviors that they want, that are desirable, foster trust, and help members formulate attainable goals, as we said in the learning objective, right? So what's the benefit of focusing on yourself rather than another person? The answer is simple. You're going to you're going to be less likely to be competitive, and you're going to be more motivated by the want or need to express your point of view. So rather than focusing on other people and what they're doing or not doing, when you focus on yourself, there's less judgment, less antagonism, and so forth. We also want you to focus on the here and now. We encourage people to engage in mindfulness, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. But mindfulness is focusing on the here and now without any judgment or pretense, right? Just being in the moment. You also want to model the desirable behaviors. So modeling, as we'll see, refers to demonstrating that which you want. And modeling can occur by the group leader, or it could occur by members of the group. And when you model it, the people who are more apprehensive at first, they can engage in something called social referencing, which is looking at what you're doing and emulating it. You want to foster trust. Now, if you want to foster trust, you have to be authentic. You have to be empathic. And we'll talk about all of these things because this is an introduction. I'm going to repeat myself, but that's very important. Now, we'll also talk about the research findings on establishing a therapeutic alliance, because research suggests the stronger the relationship is between the therapist and the client, the more likely you're going to grow. So that therapist-client relationship can become a vehicle for growth and change. Then the authors of the book present guidelines for creating effective therapeutic relationship and guidelines that can be given to group members to help them get the most out of the group experience. And then we conclude the lecture by suggesting, with suggestions for opening and closing sessions, providing structure, and determining the division of responsibility for the direction and outcome of the group, especially when you have co-leaders or co-facilitators. All right. So what are the characteristics of the initial stage of group? Well, first and foremost, people are just getting acquainted to group process and group dynamics. And they're learning how a group functions. So if you see that there are periods of silence and awkwardness, that's okay. I want to impress upon you that you should not talk over silence. Give people space to think. Allow people to internally self-regulate if there is awkwardness. But what new group leaders do is that they feel uncomfortable with the silence, so they feel a need to fill that silence in with words. And what I have found is that when you have a person who's very introspective, they might take some time to think before they speak. Or they might speak very slowly. And if they speak very slowly and you jump in, you might actually be cutting their thought off. So sit with the silence. It's almost like that game, the first one to speak first, they lose. So you as a therapist don't want to lose, right? So you want to give the space for the group members to speak. And in the event that enough time has passed and you determine either no one's going to continue to speak on this, then you facilitate or you lead the group in either a deeper question or a different direction. Now, members are evaluating the relative safety of the group, and if they deem that the group is safe, then they're going to share. But until they deem the group is safe, they're going to disclose very little. So they're trying to read you as a group leader as much as you're trying to read them. And nonverbals matter, right? People communicate a lot with their nonverbals. So it's important to pay attention to what people are saying with their words, but also what they're saying with their body. In terms of risk-taking, people are not taking many risks. They tend to be very superficial, similar to the transition phase, or they might put their toe in the water to explore if it's okay to go a step further. But risk-taking is relatively low, and there's a lot of impression management. Now, what's impression management? Impression management is where you try and present yourself in a favorable light. Now, presenting yourself in a favorable light in the beginning is understandable, but long term, if you do that, you're going to lose the authenticity of the experience. You're going to cheapen your experience, and that's not good for anyone. So that's that. All right. So be mindful of that. You also understand that trust versus mistrust is where it's at. They're trying to determine how safe it is. All of this I've said, so I'm going to move on. So what are some fears that group members experience? So I want you to imagine your first day of high school, because obviously it's much larger than group therapy, but think about your first day of high school and think about when you entered the lunchroom or cafeteria and there were a massive amount of people. What was your first feeling? It likely was a sense of anxiety, and that's not a pathological anxiety, it's a healthy anxiety, but people have anxiety over whether they're going to be accepted or rejected by their peers, whether they're going to fit in. So when I said that people are not taking many risks and they're doing impression management, right? So they're behaving in a way that is safe, in a way that they're less likely to be rejected or alienated. We also can't read minds, but one of the cognitive distortions we engage in is mind reading. And we oftentimes default to the negative. So when someone else is speaking, or if I am speaking, pardon me, I might think that you're judging me or you're thinking negatively about me, or that which I said was not articulate. So I might have a fear of being creating an appearance that I'm not smart. Now, some people who engage in group therapy have experienced the group therapy process before. Those individuals are pros. Those individuals are likely to share more from the beginning. But there are many people who experience group therapy and it's for the first time. And I bet many of you in this class are experiencing group therapy for the first time. And you didn't know what to expect, right? And you don't know what to expect when it starts. But once you get into rhythm, you will feel more safe. So there's a lot of anxiety about not knowing what to expect. And even those pros, because it's with different people, unfamiliar people, it's possible that they can have anxiety around not knowing what to expect. So other people can get frustrated in group. They can have concerns about not being articulate enough or not being able to express their thoughts and feelings effectively. If that is the case, it's upon you as the therapist, as the group leader, to guide them, to facilitate them. And if a person, you feel like they're not hitting the mark, you could say, okay, can we create space for me to ask you a deeper question, or let's look at this at a deeper level and go there that way so that they don't feel like they're not communicating effectively. You're guiding them. Or if they're too heady or intellectualizing, you could say, well, how do you feel with that thought you just shared, right? So that you can get them to give the full range of thoughts and emotions. So, but it's common. It's very common for people to not be able to or feel like they're not able to communicate effectively. If a person had experience in individual therapy or group therapy, they're going to do a little bit better at this in the beginning. So, creating trust, both the leader and the members have a role in this process. You have to facilitate a process by sharing what the personal expectations are, modeling interpersonal honesty, demonstrating respect for people, and also showing a sense of spontaneity or flexibility, right? So modeling is demonstrating specific behaviors either as the group leader or group member in a group session to show what the appropriate behavioral style should be or what you're expecting. Now, the group process, we keep using the term group process, group process, group process. The group process are activities such as establishing norms, creating group cohesion, learning to work cooperatively, solving problems together, expressing conflict openly. All of these are part of the group process. But if you're going to set a goal, the number one goal you're trying to establish is trust. Without trust, without a sense of safety and security, that will torpedo your group. You're not going to get that far into the working stage if people don't trust you or one another. So, but one's level of trust depends on their attitudes and investment in the group. So, what are some attitudes and actions that lead to trust? And the flip side is that if you don't do this, it's going to lead to mistrust in the group. So one thing is to carefully attend to what people are saying, demonstrate genuine listening. The worst thing you could do is ask a question, have a group member respond to that question, and then you restate what they said, but it wasn't what they said. Now, if that happens, if the member feels safe with you, they will correct you. But in the beginning, if you mischaracterize what people are saying, they might feel that you're going to misrepresent them, which leads to mistrust. Another characteristic that leads to trust is paying attention to nonverbal behavior. So pay attention to micro expressions. So subtle smiles, or the way a person looks, their gaze, whether they're looking at you, looking at the ground, whether their arms are folded or extended, whether it seems like they're daydreaming, whether they're twitching their leg. All of these could be something that you want to dive deeper into, because they are communicating something from the vantage point of the member that they're not saying verbally. So pay attention to the nonverbals. You also want to demonstrate empathy, and we talked about this when we talked about the various theories of counseling, but empathy is demonstrating the ability to understand someone else's perspective, right? Putting yourself in their shoes, feeling their subjective reality without losing your own identity. So I think there's this saying, walk a day in my shoes. If you demonstrate empathy, you can mentally walk in their shoes. Now, don't engage in false empathy either, but empathy, you can think about what they might be going through. And for example, let's say you had a client that was having a hard time at work and they got laid off. And you as a therapist are seeing this client and they want to talk to you about how they got laid off. And you say, I know what you're going through. Well, what you're trying to convey is empathy, but it's false empathy. They could look you back in the eye and say, you know what I'm going through as you sit here working and I'm unemployed. You don't know what I'm going through. So sometimes the most empathic statement you could say is, I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you. By saying I can't imagine, you're joining them in their pain, but you're acknowledging the limitations to your understanding. That's empathy. Genuineness and self-disclosure is just being real, making sure that your inner experience and that which you portray externally match, being authentic, being real, saying what you meaning what you say, showing respect for people. Everybody has a fundamental right to respect in the group process. And no member of the group is meant to disrespect another member. The group leader is not meant to disrespect anyone else in the group. So you have a fundamental right to respect. If you demonstrate respect, people are going to feel safe and have trust in the group. If people feel disrespected, they're going to pull away. Does that mean that you can never offer up criticism? No. There's something called caring confrontation, which is being mindful of where that person is and offering loving criticism or criticism with compassion. Because if you cannot criticize or offer a constructive feedback in a loving way, you shouldn't do it. So you want to invite members to look at aspects of themselves that they've been avoiding, but be gentle. Be gentle with their feelings. Now, identifying and clarifying the goals is going to be very, very important as well. So in the initial stage, a major task is assisting members to identify specific goals that are measurable. I keep saying SMART goals, right? So if you don't identify the proper goals, then people are going to wander aimlessly. Now, who establishes the goals? The answer is it's a collaborative process. Now, the leaders can help you in goal setting by using contracts and homework assignments. I use both of these in my group process. So a contract can be as simple as the rules or responsibilities of group, or that a person commits to taking an active or responsible stance to an issue. So, and then after we decide what we want to tackle, you sign that you're willing to focus on these issues and you're committed to positive change. Because if you say, I want to work on X, but you really aren't committed to it, you're really not interested in looking at it, you might say you are, but you're not going to get the most out of the group. So a contract will have a series of statements of the problems you want to explore and the behaviors you're willing to change. If you're not willing to change it, then we shouldn't be looking at it. We also, throughout the weeks, can assign homework. Homework is a series of exercises or behaviors. Sometimes it's actual worksheets that look like homework from school that they can either behaviorally do or reflect on and write down their experience, that they can practice both inside the group and outside of the group. Now, effective therapy isn't just what happens in the group, but it's also what happens between group sessions. So by giving a group member homework, you have them focus on their growth all week long. So you can extend the impact of the experience between the sessions as well. So it doesn't have to be that 60 or 90-minute experience. It could be 24/7. So again, the group process concepts at the initial stage. So it involves the stages groups tend to go through. So what you're going to experience is tension and conflict can build up. Some people may hold it in because they're not ready to share in the initial stage. You're going to establish the norms and work towards group cohesion and so forth, which we talked about. So what are group norms? Group norms are shared beliefs about the expected behavior that make groups function effectively. So a group norm that we might all agree upon is that we can't talk over one another. We have to take turns, right? So if we're going to communicate effectively, we need to be able to share the time. And hearing a bunch of people talk at the same time comes across as white noise, right? Now, group norms can be implicit or explicit. So implicit norms are unwritten rules, unspoken norms that have an effect on your behaviors or your responses, whereas explicit norms are clearly and directly stated. So here are some group norms. So there's an expectation of promptness and regular attendance. For me, this group norm, I do it as an explicit group norm. I make it very clear that this is an expectation. Sometimes people understand that, we're going to respect each other's time, so they don't need to be told this. So in some groups, it could be implicit. Another group norm is people, to make the most out of the experience, are going to have to share meaningful aspects about themselves. People are going to have to give feedback to one another. They're going to have to challenge one another, support one another. They're going to have to stay in the present mindset rather than in the past mindset. So I said to you that we're going to talk a little bit about research. So here are some of the research findings about therapeutic relationships. So one, in general, the bond between the therapist and the client is a significant contributing factor to positive change in therapy. There are 3 key constructs that capture the essence of the therapeutic relationship. There's the group climate, group cohesion, and alliances. So the group climate, you can have a working group or a non-working group. A working group is a group that has coalesced and you're committed to all the commitments of group. But you can have a non-working group because of toxicity, harsh criticism, and so forth. So that group climate isn't going to work, right? So you aim for a climate that is encouraging and supportive. You want group cohesion, which is a sense of community or togetherness within the group. You also want to attend to alliances. Alliances can be tricky. It's okay to lend oneself support and join a person in their experience, but you don't want members of the group to gang up against other members, so be careful with that. And one thing from the leader's point of view, if you want to be effective, avoid aggressive confrontation. Remember how I said caring confrontation works to build trust? Well, aggressive confrontation is a leadership style that has the highest risks, and you run the risk of turning your group into a non-working group. So here are some things you could do to help members get the most out of the group experience. You want to focus on building trust. This may sound redundant, but I have to tell you, this is the key word of the day. Initial stage is all about trust, building a sense of trust. You also want to ask people to attend to any persistent feelings. So if there's a certain feeling that keeps coming up, put it into the room. Say, for the last few sessions, I have been feeling frustrated. Okay, tell me more about that, right? So then you could express your experience. And no one's experience is meant to be discounted. No one's experience is wrong. Your experience is your experience. So you want to encourage people to share and engage in safe self-disclosure, healthy self-disclosure, enough self-disclosure that there's what to talk about in a group, but be mindful of safety, right? So people can overshare in the beginning, and that could create problems. But appropriate self-disclosure, both from the group members and from the group leader, is useful. You want to participate fully, right? So I talked to you about a person daydreaming as a nonverbal expression. You might see them check out, and it's your job as a group leader to say, "Hey, Dan, what are you thinking right now? Tell me a little bit about what you're experiencing in this moment in group." Right? So maybe they were daydreaming, maybe they were introspecting, you don't know. But if they were daydreaming, it brings them back into the group and allows them to participate fully. You also want to embrace or encourage change talk. Sometimes people say, "I can't do this." And they say they can't do this. In therapy, many times it's that they don't want to do it. So they say, "I can't do it," but they're really saying they don't want to do it. So you can challenge a person, say, if you feel you can't do it, I assure you, you won't do it. But if you try to do it, you might succeed. So to get people to embrace change, make sure you engage in active listening, reflective listening. Active listening is being attentive. Reflective listening is also, letting the person know how you heard it, just to make sure that you got it right. Taking feedback. Feedback is bidirectional. It can come from or multi-directional, dare I say. It can come from another member of the group. It could come from the group leader, or many other sources, right? So taking feedback, and then treat this as you're going on a journey, right? So if you're going on a journey, we're going to discover new things. Some things we're going to be excited to discover, and some things are going to be a little bit scary. But we're going to discover different dimensions of ourselves, and we're going to learn to embrace ourselves as we are, even with those scary dimensions. So here are some leader issues at the initial stage. The leaders must think about division of responsibility, the degree of structuring, how to open a group and how to close a group. So the division of responsibility is the balance between who's going to take responsibility for the direction of the group, and how you're going to share power with the group members as well. So these are discussions that the group leaders should be talking about. Degree of structuring. A very structured group, you have clear agendas for each week. Many psychoeducational groups are highly structured, but there are many therapy groups that are unstructured, and we say, okay, well, how was last week? And then people just start talking, and then people build off of one another. Now, opening a group session depends where you are in the group process. In the initial stage, your first week is all about creating an icebreaker. You should open the group with an icebreaker exercise. Now, I mentioned in another presentation that I don't do pre-group meetings. So the icebreaker that I do to open the group for the first session is to talk about the rules, and everybody collaboratively, I get out a whiteboard and we write all the rules that we can come up with together. We brainstorm together. That's the first one. Now, at the end of that brainstorming exercise, we should have a set of rules that everyone agrees upon. I like to vote upon the rules. Each rule gets voted upon unless it's unanimous or there's no opposition. If there's no opposition, then you just say, well, this is what we're going with. I also let people know that some rules are flexible, so that if we established a rule and it doesn't make sense at a later point, we can revisit the rules. And that has actually happened in a group or two where related to food or drink or things like that, where people are like, at first they wanted to please me and they said, no food, no drink. And then they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm thirsty. Is it okay if I bring in a drink? And then the group decides to pull back a little bit. That's opening a group session. Now, that's the first session. The second session should start off with a recap, a summarization of the first session, and ask, does anyone have any experience that they didn't get to share from the previous week? Right? And then the second week, you build an exercise or dialogue around the first week in that experience. Now, closing a group session. Closing a group session can be challenging for people if you feel like you're in rhythm and you don't want to cut people off. So people sometimes struggle with closing. But closing a group, you want to summarize the core points that you accomplished when you close a group. If there is a homework exercise, you want to administer that homework exercise or give the assignment that you want them to work on between the groups. And then you want to open it up for any final thoughts. Does anyone have a pressing thought or feeling that they want to share? And then people will either share or not. And that's how you close a group. So those are basics. These are just fundamentals of closing a group. Everyone has their own style. But summarization, if there are any homework exercises, and then create space for people to express themselves last time. You might say, with a little finesse, we only have about 5 more minutes in today's session. And because of that, we're going to shift towards closing the group. Does anyone have any thoughts that they didn't get to share that they want to share? Something of that nature. You can have your own style and come up with the words that work best for you. And that would be how you close a group. And that is our lecture. So I'm going to stop there. And yeah, that's that.
Hey guys, so quick check-in. I know you're all done with observing. So the first major assignment was observation of a group. Second major assignment is the leading a group. So I know we're in person. Ideally, I would have you look at the Girls Circle manual. That's in the announcements. You pick week 1 or 5 or 10. There's 10 total weeks, and then you lead that. And if you find your own group, that's okay. If you found it on the internet, you could just cite it. So with that being said, that is the second major assignment. If you need to film it on YouTube Live and run a group with like friends, family, whomever, that can also be okay. Like I said, ideally, I'd like for you to communicate with me and lead it over Zoom if we're not in person. During the fall and spring, this is in person. So we'll make it work regardless. And here is forming. So forming a group from when I taught it at University of Cincinnati. This will be quick, and I'll start the next class with this.
And welcome to our first lecture on group stages. In this lecture, we will be looking at the first stage of group development, forming, as part of our group skills in substance abuse counseling course. As we look over the objectives for the week, I want to remind you to review the chapters for the week prior to viewing the lecture, as it is intended to supplement your reading. By the end of the week, you should be able to identify the factors necessary for forming a group and describe the tasks of a beginning group. As your book points out, there are many ways to categorize and describe the stages that functional groups go through. And despite the differences in labels, most agree that groups go through between 4 and 5 stages in the life of a group. Back in the 1970s, 2 researchers named Tuckman and Jensen identified 5 stages of group development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. This still stands as a very common way for discussing group development. You may refer to the table in your book on page 84 if you want to see a comparison of a few different ways that authors have conceptualized the stages and transitions of group development. Forming a group is a process that takes several steps, and although some of the steps may be completed at the same time, none may be skipped if the group is going to form properly and thrive. First, every group relies on a clear and thoughtful rationale for existence. Groups that attempt to form without a strong rationale are likely to be unproductive and potentially harmful for their members. Leaders must also decide on the theoretical framework from which to work, and the theoretical format should be appropriate for the purposes of the group. The successful formation of a group also relies on practical planning, like the meeting time and place, and leaders should consider potential obstacles in planning this group. Considering how the members get to the meeting, if the group's intended for a certain population, say school-age children or elderly people, transportation may be a specific issue to address. Publicized group is another consideration that is addressed during the forming stage, and it's important to keep in mind that how a group is announced influences both the ways that it will be received by potential members and also the kind of people who will join. Take some time to consider whether word of mouth, personal contact, and/or written announcements will best suit your intended audience, and that will contribute to the intentionality of your group formation. Screening and pre-training are processes that involve meeting potential members either individually or in a group format to determine who should join a group and who should not, by identifying needs, expectations, and commitment, challenging myths and conceptions, and conveying information to those potential members. This is an opportunity not only for group leaders to select members, but also for potential members to make sure that the group is something they're truly interested in. Once members have been selected, pre-training serve as almost an orientation session to help members get acclimated. The selecting of group members and group leaders can be seen as an outcome of the screening and pre-training, with leaders selecting group members and group members selecting to be part of the group with those leaders. Once we have a group, there are a number of tasks that must be accomplished during the first session, including dealing with apprehension, reviewing goals and contracts, specifying rules, setting limits, promoting positive interchange among members, and resolving potential group problems. A certain level of anxiety is considered a natural part of beginning groups, and group leaders can address anxiety directly in the group or work to clarify any issues that seem to arise as a result of member anxiety. Reviewing goals and contracts within the group is an opportunity to restate the purpose of the group during the first session and allow members to share more about their own personal goals. Although some groups may begin with an established set of group rules, the first session is a great time to review these rules and also allow members to make contributions to the rules. Stating rules in positive terms rather than negative terms will help set the tone of the group. For instance, rather than having a rule against violence, the group could state that members will respect the physical and psychological safety of others at all times. Limits helpers understand boundaries in the group, and limits can be addressed during the initial session, but must also be addressed when members test them in the group setting, either by breaking rules or norms. Group leaders can promote positive interactions among group members by being enthusiastic, by drawing out members, holding focus on interesting topics, or shifting the focus when topics are irrelevant or interesting to only a few members, by cutting off any hostile or negative interactions as well. There are a number of problems that can occur during the formation of a group and afterward, some of which involve people and some of which involve process. Subgroups are one such example of a problem that can come up in group process where cliques of members band together and may become troublesome. Leaders must remain tuned in to interaction patterns and promote interchange among members, potentially by providing more direction for interaction through exercises or through activities. Your textbook authors also addresses with group member behavior, and the caution that I want to echo as you consider difficult member roles during the first session is that the tendency to label members based on their behavior can be incredibly distracting and disrupt the success of a group. Rather than labeling members based on potentially difficult behavior, it can be helpful instead to see that behavior as a symptom of an issue that's developed in the group and approach it with an open mind. For instance, silent members may be feeling hostile or attempting to withdraw from the group, but they may also be shy, reflective, or simply slow to assert themselves. Instead of seeing a silent member as difficult, it can be helpful to ask a simple open-ended question like, what do you think about what the other members have been saying? Pages 102 to 104 provide strategies for the beginning stage of a group, and I would encourage you to review these pages carefully as they're quite helpful. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, I'll ask you to view clips to illustrate the issues we're discussing. To access the videos, you may need to sign in using your UCID and password. You should then be connected directly to the videos. If you have any trouble accessing the video once you've successfully logged in, try using the link again or searching for the video title. This one is titled Leading in the Here and Now, the Initial Stage. In our first viewing, we'll see a new group coming together and forming. In the coming weeks, I'll ask you to view 2 more videos as we watch this same group grow and develop. This first video lasts about an hour, so I encourage you to either carve out time to view this in one sitting or split the video into smaller segments and watch it over the course of a couple viewings. As you watch this week, try to look for the tasks that exist in the beginning group. As members and leaders deal with apprehension, review goals and rules, begin to set limits, promote positive interchange among members, and resolve potential group problems. Looking at the link, you may notice that this video is not captured recently. However, the group leader you're about to watch is a highly respected member of the group or profession and has developed some excellent teaching tools, including these videos. Enjoy. In summary, forming is characterized by initial caution associated with any new experience, attempting to avoid being rejected by others. During this first stage of group development, group members try to be superficial, center conversation around historical or future events that do not have a direct impact on the group. Tasks during this beginning stage include dealing with apprehension, reviewing member goals and contracts, specifying rules, setting limits, and promoting positive interchange. This serves to conclude our lecture on forming, and I will see you next week.
All right, thank you, everybody. I have no other details for now. I look forward to reading your first major assignments, and email me about when you'd want to do the Zoom for your group any Tuesday or Thursday here. See you later.